I asked 100 CEOs their secret to success. 99 gave me the same BS answer. One told me the truth. Most people operate from a fundamental misunderstanding about scarcity. They see limited resources, limited time, limited opportunities, and their brain immediately triggers a primal response. Hoard what you have, protect your territory, compete for every scrap. This is the scarcity mindset everyone talks about, and yes, it's destructive. But here's what nobody tells you. Successful people don't just reject the scarcity mindset. They reverse it completely. And the reversal is so counterintuitive that most people can't even see it happening right in front of them. When an average person encounters scarcity, their cognitive architecture narrows. Psychologists call this tunneling. Your attentional resources constrict. You become fixated on the immediate lack. Your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for long-term planning and strategic thinking, gets hijacked by your amygdala screaming that you're in danger. This isn't weakness. This is evolution. For 200,000 years, scarcity meant death, so your brain learned to panic first and think later. The problem is that this same neural pathway that kept your ancestors alive now keeps you poor, stressed, and stuck. Elite performers have discovered something remarkable. They've learned to perceive scarcity not as a threat to avoid, but as a signal to pursue. When they see a scarce resource, a limited opportunity, a narrow window of time, their brain doesn't contract. It expands. They've neurologically rewired their response pattern. Where you see scarcity and think protection, they see scarcity and think leverage. This is the reversal. It's not positive thinking. It's not manifestation nonsense. It's a fundamental reorientation of how your nervous system interprets environmental signals. Here's how it works in practice. When a market becomes saturated, most entrepreneurs panic. Their scarcity alarms start blaring. Customers are scarce now. Attention is scarce. Money is scarce. They cut costs, reduce quality, compete on price, and slowly destroy their own business. But the successful entrepreneur sees the exact same saturated market and thinks differently. If attention is scarce, that means attention is valuable. If customers are harder to reach, that means the customers you do reach are worth more. Scarcity isn't the problem. Scarcity is the entire opportunity. They lean into the constraint instead of running from it. The psychological mechanism behind this is called reappraisal, and it's one of the most powerful tools in human cognition. You're not changing reality, you're changing how your brain codes the meaning of reality. Successful people have trained themselves, often without even realizing it, to automatically reappraise scarcity signals. Their brain has learned through repeated exposure and reinforcement that scarcity predicts value, innovation, and competitive advantage. Your brain has learned the opposite. Your brain has learned that scarcity predicts loss, failure, and pain. Same stimulus, completely different neural response, completely different behavior, completely different outcome. This is why successful people can walk into the same situation you're in and see possibilities you can't see. It's not intelligence. It's not luck. It's not connections. It's that their threat detection system has been reprogrammed. What activates your fight or flight response activates their creative problem-solving response. The scarcity that makes you small makes them sharp. And they never reveal this because if they did, you'd realize that success isn't about having more resources than everyone else. It's about perceiving the resources you have through a completely different psychological lens. Once you understand that distinction, everything changes. But most people never get there because their brain won't let them see past the panic. There's a psychological phenomenon that most people completely misunderstand, and it's costing them every meaningful relationship and opportunity they'll ever have. We're taught from childhood that vulnerability is weakness. Show your flaws and people will exploit them. Admit your limitations and you'll lose respect. Keep your armor on, stay invincible. Never let them see you sweat. This belief is so deeply embedded in our collective psyche that we don't even question it anymore. We just accept it as truth. But here's what successful people discovered a long time ago. Vulnerability isn't weakness. Strategic vulnerability is the most powerful influence tool that exists, and they're using it on you right now while you're busy pretending to be perfect. The key word here is strategic. Most people think vulnerability means emotional dumping, oversharing your trauma, or presenting yourself as incompetent and helpless. That's not vulnerability, that's poor boundaries and social miscalibration. Strategic vulnerability is something entirely different. It's the calculated disclosure of specific weaknesses that actually increase your status, deepen trust, and create psychological reciprocity in ways that perfection never could. The mechanism behind this is hardwired into human neurobiology. When someone presents themselves as flawless, your brain doesn't trust them, not consciously, but deep in your limbic system, alarm bells start ringing. Your threat detection circuitry activates because perfection signals deception. No human is perfect, so if someone is presenting that way, they're either lying or hiding something dangerous, successful. People understand this at an instinctive level. They know that your brain is constantly scanning for authenticity markers, for signs that the person in front of you is real and trustworthy. And one of the most powerful authenticity markers is the controlled admission of weakness, not catastrophic weakness, not incompetence in areas that matter, but carefully selected vulnerabilities that humanize them without undermining their core competence. A CEO who admits they're terrible at remembering names, a negotiator who confesses they sometimes get nervous before big meetings, an expert who acknowledges the limits of their knowledge in adjacent fields. These admissions don't make them weaker, they make them believable, and believability is the foundation of influence. But here's where it gets really interesting. Strategic vulnerability doesn't just make you more trustworthy. It actually triggers a reciprocity loop in the other person's brain. When you share something vulnerable, even something small, the person receiving that information experiences a neurochemical shift. Their oxytocin levels increase, their mirror neurons activate, their brain unconsciously interprets your vulnerability as a gift, as a signal that you trust them, and human psychology demands that gifts be reciprocated. They feel compelled to match your disclosure, to share something of their own, to lower their guard in response to you lowering yours. This is how successful people create instant rapport, extract information, and build alliances that last decades. They're not being weak, they're being surgical. The people who refuse to be vulnerable, who insist on maintaining their perfect facade, don't realize what they're sacrificing. They think they're protecting themselves, but what they're actually doing is building walls so high that no one can reach them, trust them, or connect with them in any meaningful way. They move through life wondering why relationships feel transactional, why people don't open up to them, why influence always feels like pushing a boulder uphill. And the answer is simple. You can't connect with a mask. You can only connect with a person. Successful people figured out which parts of themselves to reveal and which to protect. They've mastered the art of seeming invulnerable while strategically deploying vulnerability exactly when and where it creates maximum psychological impact. That's not weakness. That's mastery. Every psychology textbook will tell you the same thing. Delayed gratification is the cornerstone of success, the famous marshmallow test, the ability to resist immediate pleasure for future reward. We've been sold this narrative so completely that it's become gospel. Successful people can wait, they have discipline. They deny themselves now so they can win later, and yes, there's truth in that. But what nobody tells you is that truly successful people aren't actually suffering through the wait. They're not white-knuckling their way through delayed gratification like some kind of psychological endurance test. They've discovered something far more sophisticated. They've found the loophole. And once you see it, you'll realize that everything you thought you knew about self-control was incomplete. The loophole is this. Successful people don't experience delay the way you do. While you're sitting there feeling deprived, counting down the days until you get your reward, fighting against every impulse in your body, they've neurologically reframed the entire experience. They've turned waiting into winning, not metaphorically, literally. Their brain's reward circuitry fires during the delay period itself, not just at the end. They've hacked the dopamine system that's supposed to make you miserable when you don't get what you want, immediately. And the way they do this reveals something fundamental about how human motivation actually works. Here's the mechanism. Your brain releases dopamine not just when you receive a reward, but when you anticipate a reward. That anticipation phase, that gap between wanting something and getting it, is actually where most of your dopamine activity occurs. This is why the hunt is often more exciting than the kill. Why planning a vacation can be more pleasurable than taking it. Why the lead up to Christmas morning felt better than the actual presents. Your brain is designed to find pleasure in pursuit, not just in possession. Most people never learn to consciously access this system. They experience the anticipation as stress, as discomfort, as something to endure. Successful people have learned to reinterpret that exact same neural state as progress, as momentum, as evidence that something valuable is coming. The cognitive reframe is deceptively simple but neurologically profound. Instead of thinking I can't have this yet, they think I'm building toward this right now. Instead of focusing on deprivation, they focus on accumulation. Every day they don't spend money is a day their investment grows. Every morning they wake up early is another repetition strengthening their discipline. Every moment they resist the easy path is proof they're becoming the person who deserves the outcome they want. They've transformed the waiting period from a punishment into an identity-building exercise. And your brain responds to identity-congruent behavior by releasing reward chemicals. When you see yourself as the kind of person who does hard things, doing hard things stops feeling hard. It starts feeling like winning. This is why successful people often seem unnaturally patient. It's not that they have superhuman willpower or some genetic advantage in their prefrontal cortex. It's that they've conditioned their brain to find pleasure in the process itself. The delay isn't the price they pay for success. The delay is the success. Every moment of restraint, every choice to wait, every decision to defer gratification is registered in their nervous system as a victory. They're collecting evidence that they're the kind of person who controls their impulses, who plays the long game, who wins. And that feeling, that sense of identity reinforcement, is more rewarding than whatever they're waiting for. This is the loophole. When waiting feels like winning, you're no longer delaying gratification. You're experiencing it in real time. The human brain processes approximately 11 million bits of information every second, but your conscious mind can only handle about 40 bits. This means that at any given moment, you're ignoring almost everything. You have to. If you tried to consciously process every sound, every visual stimulus, every sensation, every piece of data coming at you, your cognitive system would collapse immediately. So your brain has evolved sophisticated filtering mechanisms. It decides what matters and what doesn't, what deserves your attention and what gets deleted before you even know it existed. Most people never take control of this filtering process. They let their environment, their emotions, their primitive threat detection systems decide what they pay attention to. Successful people do the opposite. They've mastered what psychologists call selective ignorance, and it's one of the most ruthlessly effective cognitive strategies that exists. This isn't about being uninformed or burying your head in the sand. This is about understanding that your attention is your most finite and valuable resource, and everything you allow into your awareness has a cost. Every notification you read, every opinion you absorb, every problem you acknowledge consumes cognitive bandwidth that could have been allocated to something that actually moves your life forward. Successful people have become surgical about what they refuse to know. They've identified entire categories of information that most people obsess over, and they've made the deliberate choice to remain ignorant of them. Not because they can't handle the information, but because they've calculated that knowing it would make them weaker, slower, or more distracted. The psychological principle at work here is called cognitive load theory. Your working memory has strict limitations. When you fill it with irrelevant information, you're not just wasting space. You're actively degrading your ability to think clearly about things that matter. Every piece of gossip you hear about a colleague, every political controversy you follow, every market fluctuation you monitor, every comparison you make between yourself and others creates what neuroscientists call interference. These mental artifacts don't just sit passively in your brain. They compete for processing resources. They generate emotional reactions. They trigger rumination loops. And while you're busy thinking about things you can't control and don't matter, the people who are actually winning have quarantined those thoughts entirely. Here's what this looks like in practice. Successful people don't read comment sections. They don't monitor what people say about them. They don't keep up with industry drama. They don't track their competitors obsessively. They don't follow breaking news that has no operational relevance to their goals. They don't engage with every email, every meeting request, every person who demands their time. This isn't arrogance. This is information hygiene. They've recognized that most of what the world wants them to care about is designed to capture attention, not to improve outcomes. And they've made peace with the social cost of not knowing things that everyone else knows. The hardest part of selective ignorance isn't deciding what to ignore. It's dealing with the anxiety that comes from deliberately not knowing. Your brain has been shaped by evolution to treat uncertainty as danger. When you choose not to track something, your amygdala sends up warning signals. What if you miss something important? What if someone judges you for not knowing? What if ignorance puts you at a disadvantage? Successful people have learned to tolerate this discomfort because they understand something most people don't. The fear of missing out is almost always more costly than actually missing out. The information you think you need is usually the information that's keeping you stuck. And the most powerful thing you can do with your attention isn't deciding what to focus on, it's deciding what you're brave enough to ignore completely. So here's the truth they'll never tell you. Success isn't about knowing more than everyone else. It's about having the courage to know less. While everyone around you is drowning in information, paralyzed by options, and bleeding attention in 1,000 directions, you'll be the one moving in silence with absolute clarity. And when they finally look up and ask how, you got so far ahead, you'll smile, give them some generic advice about hard work and persistence, and you'll never tell them the real answer. Because now you're one of them. Now you know the secret, and the secret stays secret.